thank you everyone for joining. Good afternoon. I'm really looking forward to this session. I think it will probably take around about 10 or 15 minutes to talk through the number of slides, and there'll be plenty of time for questions or some collaboration at the end of it. So let me get started. This project and program is really focused on upskilling those employees who are in roles that are at risk of automation. So as we all know, automation and technology and AI is changing the workplace, and many of those roles that people have been doing for a long time are at risk. And this is all part of the government's national retraining scheme. I'm William Akerman, Managing Director of My Kind of Future, and joining me today from My Kind of Future are John Gray, our Chief Technology Officer, and Stephanie Warren, our Head of Career Development and Coaching.
Morning.
Everyone.
Hi there. So the agenda is a little bit about us and the direction we've come from, the opportunity for you to get involved, a bit of background on the acceleration of automation, and that was happening already, but I think we're going to see a greater acceleration due to COVID-19, about our tech platform, so about the product that can help retrain those people at risk, and then how you can get involved at a really straightforward level. So to start with a little bit about us, My Kind of Future believe that every person should have equal power and opportunity to shape their future. We really focus on supporting people from every type of background, first of all, successfully get into a job, and then once they're there, to help them do well in that job. And that's great for those individuals, but equally it provides a really great success for employers, reducing attrition rates and improving productivity. The partners we work with tend to be very large businesses, and from every sector. We work with around 70 great companies and some amazing people within those organisations. And more recently, we've started to partner with government, and the National Retraining Scheme is a great example of that. I'll just give you a kind of brief overview of the platform, the technology that we've created that has delivered fantastic success in supporting people into work and then to do well in work. It's called Connector, and really at the heart of it, it creates connections between employees and their employer. It builds strong relationships, and ultimately what that does is it gives people a sense of belonging. And what we've found is that when people really feel like they belong in an organization, they're much more likely to do well, progress their career, and stay with that employer. And again, that's great for them and great for the employer themselves. We use some clever technology, some behavioral science to get it right, but the two key elements really within the platform are one-to-one mentoring and bite-sized content delivered just at the right time. And that combination of content at the right time that's easy to consume, combined with mentoring, one-to-one mentoring, has really paid dividends for those people and our partners, driving up engagement rates, completion rates of content, and the user experience. Actually, our user experience has jumped to 4.7 in the last few weeks through everything that's happening. So the project itself, and where I think there's a great opportunity for you to get involved with, first of all, it's come from the government National Retraining Scheme. As I've said, there are absolutely no costs. So the government is funding this project. They're funding us and Connector. And the real ask and the opportunity is for you, for employers, to join a small cohort of employers from different industries. And we've already got some great interest from a supermarket, a bank, an IT company, and a law firm, but there's room for that cohort to grow slightly. And then identify roles that are at risk within your organization, and they might be at risk in the next month or two, or actually they might not be at risk for another 15 months, 12 months, but potentially they are at risk. And then we'll produce a branded Connector platform for you. We'll launch to suit your timescales. We'll support you and your colleagues and those employees in those roles, and then we'll produce all of the reports. So I think it's a fantastic offer with great opportunity for learnings and great profile as well. So a little bit, first of all, about how automation is changing our workforces and how it's going to accelerate right now. We've all heard of the fourth industrial revolution, and as the founder of the World Economic Forum said, there's never been a time of greater promise from technology or potential human peril. And I think we've seen that ourselves in our own organizations. And recently, COVID-19 is accelerating that automation. I've spoken with a couple of HR directors in the last 3 weeks, and both of them have independently said that automation's always been on the boardroom or the chief exec agenda, but it's suddenly taken a leap forward, and it's really accelerated. And really that's through 3 points. First of all, the need to survive for many businesses. So protect their business viability and productivity through technology. Secondly, just the discovery they've made by their ability to adopt technology. Businesses can work in different ways. Technology is proving more effective than ever imaginable. So just having that discovery has made it more real. And secondly, about future-proofing. So through COVID-19, the boardroom discussion is around future-proofing for the future. And so automation has jumped up that agenda and is set to accelerate. And for technology to really deliver that automation, several things need to happen. First of all, we all know that technology itself is accelerating in its capability, but it has to be useful. It has to be applied. Secondly, businesses have to adopt it. And many employers, perhaps medium-sized companies or even large companies, are slower to adopt the technology that's available. And then thirdly, the humans, our employees, our colleagues, have to adapt to that technology once it's adopted by our employers. And most commentators kind of put us as a nation roughly where that blue circle is on the chart up until recently. And the gap between the adoption and how humans, our employees, are adapting to it is first of all risk to human jobs, but also it's a gap in potential productivity where the workforce can deliver more productivity if things work well. Now, COVID-19 and that acceleration, employers are being forced to adopt technology, and some of it has been really successful for them. That's widened the gap, the risk to human jobs, and widened the potential workforce productivity. So that has suddenly changed. And again, talking to those HR directors, that's something that is going to stay with us. So the adoption of technology has increased, productivity from that technology has increased, but humans adapting to it, of course, hasn't kept pace, which means the risk to those jobs and workforce productivity is an opportunity or a gap. And from a human perspective, there is a real challenge here. Disadvantaged people who were already further from the workplace are now being pushed further back. And as our economy slows, as the government and economists expect it to, more people will be added to that list through redundancy. And equally, as automation accelerates, more people are at risk of being made redundant. And certainly within the 70 employers that we work with right now, some employers are actively retraining their employees. And I've had some amazing conversations, as I say, in the last 3 weeks, where some employers are doing just that. But equally, others aren't seizing the moment. For those who take action, the commercial productivity opportunities and the social impact prize is really, really big. I think this is going to be a big change, as well. We know it's going to be a good change, but even before COVID-19, shareholder returns were being seen as not the only thing that matters. The Sustainable Development Goals were building great momentum from places that we never would have expected. Even fund managers like BlackRock were signing up to Sustainable Development Goals. And there was a real shift towards corporations supporting their communities and their employees just as much as shareholder returns. And so now what we're seeing is a moment of inflection, I guess, or a moment where there's a left or there's a right for those employees to go. There is an opportunity for employers to retrain and reskill those employees to support their communities, to align with the SDGs and to move forward. And I believe that we owe it to ourselves to back our communities, to back people, to back humans. And for us to do that, it's absolutely within our power. The skills that are in demand now in 2020 are completely teachable, learnable. Things that 5 years ago were 10th on the list, like creativity, now 5 years later are in the top 3. So onto this project and how you can get involved. In 2018, the government pledged £100 million to retrain those roles at risk of automation. Fast forward about 18 months to now, to 2020, and Connector, our platform, was selected through a competitive process. And I'm thrilled that we were selected really for our digital mentoring and the short form content and how that can support people to retrain. And right now we're gathering this small group of employers to share best practice amongst the group to drive that commercial return, but at the same time deliver that positive social impact for those employees. How will Connector support you? Well, first of all, as I say, it's government funded, and it can be used to help retrain those people who are in the business right now or who are currently furloughed. We're leveraging technology, so we'll provide you with your branded platform, your branded version of Connector. We'll pretty much do everything, so we'll train mentors, we'll create content for you. And as I say, as part of the group you'll be joining, it really is going to be a fantastic, innovative thought leader group aiming to increase the ROI for their companies, as well as delivering that impact for those employees. So once we start working together, you'll identify roles that might be at risk right now, or they might be at risk in the next 12 to 15 months. We'll leverage Connector, which is a world-class platform, and at every step of the way, we will record and report on the success. And Nesta, the delivery partner for the government, is bringing real expertise and rigor in developing those case studies and detailed reports to share internally with your colleagues and externally. I'd just like to quickly go through the key features of Connector before I hand over to Steph and to John, my colleagues. So the key features I've touched on already. First of all, one-to-one mentoring. So this is always on, light touch mentoring to offer the mentees support. And it's just like a messaging platform with a few more tailored features. Secondly, short form content. So this is easily consumable, bite-sized content that is delivered just at the right moment when someone needs it. And finally, the data dashboard to give you, the employer, complete insight. So I'm just going to spend 30 seconds on each of those 3 points. So first of all, mentors. Once we provide you with your branded platform, we'll help you select and train mentors from within your team. We can work with you to make sure they don't get overloaded with too much mentoring. So if you say they can manage an hour a week or an hour a month, we can just within Connector dial that up or down. And those mentors can help support your team whose role is at risk of automation with career adaptability, career motivation, and top-line relevant skills. So we're not looking to teach detailed technical skills. This won't help people learn to become developers, for example, but it will help them to adapt to new roles. All of the mentors are supported by our team. And then in terms of content, we provide ready developed content, plus we'll co-create content for you and with you. And again, to support those real key areas where we need to shift people's motivations and adaptability, as well as some of their skills. And the last point that I mentioned of those 3 is just providing you with a platform that has complete insight. And the dashboard on Connector is a single instance reporting that provides you information by any segment, so demographic or role, and you can view the activity, who's engaging with mentors, who isn't, who's consuming content, which type of content, or who isn't. And then if you run a face-to-face mentoring scheme, it can all integrate and record it. So you have one single reporting page. I'm going to hand over now just for this slide to Steph, who's just going to talk about putting the mentees, the learners, at the heart of everything we do. Steph.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, absolutely. At My Kind of Future, we're always looking at the end user and putting them at the centre of the development of the campaigns and projects we work on. And really, for the first point here, we understand that we need to look at the whole learner. So especially with regards to the NRS cohort, we need to look at the context in which they are living and working. So with this project, we're really going to be looking at developing both their intrinsic and extrinsic motivations to enable them to learn and invest in their continual professional development. And that's a really important initial step for us in this project. The content of the bite-sized learning that Will spoke of is based around taking the learners on a journey through the 5 C's of career adaptability. So there we're looking at developing their career concern, their control, their curiosity, confidence and commitment to their career. And by looking at those, we're overall will be increasing their career adaptability. And ultimately advancing their self-career management skills, which is really important for these changing times. And we'll be increasing their readiness for changes in the workplace. And these skills are the sort of soft skills that are really needed to enable these people to develop in this changing world. And finally, we're going to support in removing any barriers to learning that our participants might have. So our connector platform, it's always on. The pace of learning can be dictated by the user and the individual, which is really important with the NRS cohort. And we aim to cater for a diverse range of learning styles, which again is really important for these participants that we're going to be engaging. And all of this together will really enable us to provide the best and most appropriate content at the right time.
Thank you, Steph. That's a great summary and how we'll support your team, your colleagues who are being retrained. I'm really putting those people at the heart of the platform and heart of what we do. I'm going to pass over to my colleague John, who's just going to explain a little bit of the clever technology inside Connector and how that's doing what it's doing. John.
Thanks, Will. Hi everyone. So yeah, just wanted to take you through a couple of slides in terms of the process that we'll go through with our partners on this project to ensure that we have a great outcome for you as organisations as well as for your employees. So we've broken it down into 3 stages. So we have this load stage to begin with, which is where we're looking at the particular user group within your organisation whose roles are at risk due to automation. When we look at that group, we're going to then look at the particular parameters that define each of those groups or individuals. And those give us some indications and measures in which we can then begin to think about how we match those individuals with other individuals, the mentors within your organizations, to make some powerful connections and support for those people who are looking or whose roles will be changing over the next few months and years. We do that primarily, we're looking at the NRS, the National Retraining Scheme personas that Steph mentioned, but we'll also adapt with the particular groups that you have within your organizations. So we'll also look at any other processes that you might have been running in the past in terms of those kind of support, buddying, mentoring systems that you may have had, where you've had success and otherwise, to try and load the system or prime the system with as much information as we have before we go live with you. We use those parameters to sort of set the engine in that first stage to say what we expect will be a good match between those individuals looking for support and those mentors that you have within the organization. So that becomes our launch phase. So we sort of set the engine with those initial matching criteria, but then we will run tests ongoing with your organization and with those groups to see how those outcomes are then panning out, whether they are proving successful or not. And that takes us into the learn phase. So that's where we will then, depending on the amount of data that's going through, we'll run those cycles as often as we can to improve the engine and improve those matches. and ultimately to ensure that as many people as possible are having positive outcomes from this process. So that's the mentor matching engine. I think if we go on to the next slide, this was just to also say that we will not only be using that initial data that we have from your organization, and also from once the connector is up and running for you, seeing what the data is saying. We also bring in some external expertise, namely from Owen Service, who's here on the slide, who is one of the co-founders of the Behavioural Insights team within government, a leader in his field in terms of behavioural science and how we can use that within our user experiences to ensure that the messaging, the wording, the content, as well as the notifications of what to do when, are at the appropriate time to nudge those individuals into the process that we think is going to be best for them. That all makes a lot more sense when we get into talking about the NRS personas, because certainly those personas look at individuals, some of whom are ready to adapt and are willing to adapt, but there will also be individuals within your organizations who may be less adaptable currently. So using that kind of nudge and behavioral science technology is really important to get them ready for these changes that are coming in their roles.
Thanks, John. Well, hopefully that just gives you a kind of snippet of the insight on how technology can really be clever stuff and can, in this case, help support those people whose role is at risk, and actually using technology for good to help retrain them into future roles. In summary, this is a great opportunity, I believe. We're in a very luxurious position where government is funding us and therefore you to really support your company and your ambitions to retrain those people who are currently employed by you, but who in the future, their role might be at risk. And we can take an action right now. And we can take a really tailored action for you. We understand that already of the 4 or 5 organizations who are keen to partner with us are in quite different positions. One of the law firms, they've got roles that they know will be at risk, but not for a year. And that's absolutely fine. We're going to partner with that organization and begin that retraining over the next 12 months. Whereas another organization has a burning need now. They know that those roles are at risk in the next 2 months. And so we'll just work to their timeline. So we are in a really flexible position. There are no costs. And what we're looking for in the next week or 2 are expressions of interest, whether you'd like to join this cohort of about 7 employers. And together or will be led by you in identifying which roles are at risk. Produce a branded platform, so you'll have your own connected platform. We'll support you and your colleagues throughout the whole process and launch to a timeline that suits you. And then provide detailed reports, which will be great for you individually, but also for your organization to be held as best practice, as part of the national retraining scheme, is going to provide great kudos and opportunity for corporate communications and great internal as well as external success. So I hope this whistle stop tour has been interesting. If you've got any questions now, then please go ahead. But alternatively, follow up. Follow up, and we can have a longer chat on how it might sit alongside something you're already doing, or it might sit, kind of as something new you're doing. But I'd urge you to follow up, and I hope you get involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. We've just had one question come in from another Will, who asks, are there any criteria that employees need to meet to qualify for support via Connector? How are mentees matched with suitable mentors?
Okie dokie. So there's a couple of questions there, Han. You might have to nudge me there. But
no,
the criteria really are having some jobs that are either now or in the future at risk of automation. And I must admit, when we initially began working on this program, or when we were selected, I came with a preconception which actually only some industries will be affected. But I've already been disproven through a number of conversations. So a technology company and then an engineering company have immediately said, no, we've got roles that will be at risk. So in terms of the industry or the company, there are no restrictions whatsoever. In terms of the cohort, there is a kind of government profile, which is really the target beneficiary. and that is ages of people who are between 24 and 55, I think, who probably haven't been to university education and have a salary at a certain level or below. However, having said that, our expectation is that when we work with employers, some of the cohort will fit within that, and some of the cohort will fit outside of that. And we'll work with you, the employer, for the whole cohort and just identify which fall either side of it. And then Hannah, the second question, do you remind me?
I'm happy to take that one, Will, if you want. It was on the matching, how the matching's done.
Yeah, so John, how are mentees matched with suitable mentors?
Yeah, so it's a depend question or answer, but what we'll do is we're starting with the 4 NRS National Retraining Scheme personas, and then we will through a short questionnaire at the beginning of the process, when end users or mentees join the platform, we'll ask some questions which will then give us enough information to know which persona to put them in, and then we will with the employer make some estimations of where we think a good fit between persona 1 and a group of mentors will be. We'll also ask a short series of questions to the incoming mentors as well, in order to have enough parameters in each group to be able to make some initially some intelligent matching based on what we've seen over the last 4 years of running Connector, where we think there'll be a good match between learning style, personality type, and various other things. But then there will be this learn phase where we may be wrong, or we may be right in some areas and wrong in others. So we'll be constantly reviewing the data to say, where did we get the match right, and where do we need to reset the matches to say, actually for this group we've got it wrong, but we'll leave some randomization element in there as well, so that we can then pick up where we do then end up having matches between other groups of mentees and mentors. It does depend, so a lot of this stuff obviously depends on the sample size within your organization. Very difficult to do it on 2 or 3 people, so we need a certain number of mentors and mentees in there and a certain number of interactions to take place in order to make those those improvements in that learning cycle. So hopefully Will, that answers your question. If you've got any more, then you can follow up with me via Hannah's email in the invite.
Fab, thank you, John. I don't think there's any more questions come in for now.
Perfect. Well, in that case, listen, thank you.
Hello, sorry, I just had a hello. My apologies. It's Balvi here. I'm calling from I'm from 3 Mobile.
Hi Balvi, thanks for joining us.
Hi, that's a pleasure. It's great. Thank you so much for the presentation. Really interesting to learn about this new scheme. I've already been speaking to the government about this scheme coming, and I understand Nesta, as you mentioned, are currently piloting it, and it's being piloted in sectors and geographical areas. I guess the question we have is that we currently have a levy, a very large levy pot. We put our apprentices through that levy pot. So question I'd put to the government is, can we use the levy pot? Can there be some more flexibility around how employers use the levy to support career transitions? And the feedback I had was yes, that this NRS scheme could very well do that. However, what I'm hearing today, Will, from your explanation is that it's only a particular profile of a candidate. For example, they have to be at risk of redundancy. And so I guess I just wanted to confirm and clarify, is that really the absolute criteria, that you have to identify first somebody who's at risk? It can't just be for somebody who wants to move from our retail business into our core head office tech and ops business, for example, to have a career in technology. So I just wanted to understand the parameters and the rules around engagement for the NRS scheme, and whether or not it would then be of any benefit to 3.
Thank you, Babi. I really appreciate that. That's some great comments. So the fact that the levy could be used to support this wider, headline is fantastic news. That's great. For this project that we're running, there is no cost anyway. So I don't think that would be something that we'd have to focus on here. However, and then in terms of which cohort is it applicable for, the cohort doesn't have to be at risk of redundancy right now.
Okay.
But they do have to be identified as in roles that automation could jeopardize that at some point in the future. And I mentioned that law firm. So currently the cohort they're thinking about, they're not at risk of redundancy. They've got no plans to make them redundant. there's nothing on the horizon, but they are beginning to think on the longer term, the longer term out, 1 year, 2 year and beyond. And they can see that technology changes will ultimately automate some of those roles. So there's no plan for redundancy now, but they're kind of thinking ahead. Now, some of the examples that you gave, and forgive me, we could always chat after this in more detail.
Yeah, sure.
But if it was a middle manager who just wanted to become a more senior manager, I'm not sure whether that would fit within the role, unless you said, well, this middle manager, in a year's time, technology and automation, will reduce chances of the need for that. So we can definitely talk about that. And then in the terms of the actual shape of the cohort, I think everyone is completely realistic that there'll be so many different roles, so many different profiles, that there'll be people from every cohort, and some will fit perfectly into the government's national retraining scheme profile, and others will be kind of either side of that, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for that, Will. And sorry, just to clarify on one point, this was a question I did ask the government, is can we use the levy pot? And they said, we don't think you can use a levy pot for this, but there is a separate fund that we are using for the national retraining scheme. So I think that's what they were trying to explain to me, is that we'll be able to draw down from this fund via agencies like yourself.
Oh, I love that.
I guess that's what they were trying to tell.
I really love that. Can we pick up after this webinar, perhaps? Because I'd really love to chat more about that. That sounds exciting, actually.
My pleasure. Yeah, it'd be quite good to connect, and just so I can understand a bit more about this scheme as well, and think about its suitability for us. So yeah, for sure, we'll have a conversation.
Let's do that. Thank you.
Thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hannah, I don't know if we've got any more questions, or we can wrap up there. And as I say, feel free. My email is cheerio.
Thanks, Will. Thank you all.